Welcome to Hydrogen Rising, a bi-weekly podcast created and hosted by the global law firm K&L Gates that brings you analysis of critical, cutting-edge issues impacting the global hydrogen market. We look forward to your engagement and feedback. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out if you have ideas about new topics you'd like us to cover.
Hi, and welcome everyone to Hydrogen Rising. I'm Sandy Safro. I'm a practice group coordinator for K&L Gates Oil, Gas, and Resources Practice Group, and I'm here with one of my co-leads on our hydrogen practice, David Wochner. David is also a practice area leader for the firm's global policy and regulatory practice area. Hey, David.
Hey, Sandy, thanks, and really good to be with you. I'm really excited to be hosting our first podcast for Hydrogen Rising today, K&L Gates' new bi-weekly podcast addressing issues impacting the global hydrogen economy. You know, Sandy, I have to say, when you and I started practicing law together more than 12 years ago, I never would have imagined we'd be hosting a bi-weekly podcast, let alone one focused on hydrogen. Of course, back then, hydraulic fracturing had just begun to remake the U.S. energy landscape, and the United States was on the verge of transforming from a historic energy importer into truly a market-changing energy exporter.
That's right, David. I definitely remember those days well, and the global energy markets certainly have changed in recent years. While natural gas and LNG will continue to be a critical component of the global energy portfolio, I am so excited about the future of energy and the launch of our new podcast, in which we're going to be focusing on legal, regulatory, policy, and commercial issues impacting this industry that finally appears to be on the brink of commercial scale development. One interesting development that I just want to highlight has actually been the appropriation by governments in response to the COVID-19 pandemic of substantial financial resources to stimulate economic activity, especially for potential green or clean energy incentives, which have included hydrogen. For example, and this is just one of several examples, France, Germany, and Spain serve as really good demonstration for this, because together these countries have authorized government investment of nearly 25 billion euro, which is approximately 30 billion US dollars over the next 10 to 20 years to develop the hydrogen economy.
That's remarkable, Sandy, and those aren't the only countries that are betting big on hydrogen. Of course, worth keeping in mind that these types of public investments necessarily come with substantial private investments in infrastructure, major government engagement through the creation of regulatory regimes, development of commercial structures for trading of the commodity, and technological advancements, right, that require review and approval by governmental entities prior to commercial scale deployment. So these are maybe just some of the topics we'll be covering in Hydrogen Rising over the coming months and years. Today, I thought you and I might want to cover some of the terms that we'll be using in the podcast series, and also note some of the overarching questions that our team at K&L Gates has been talking and thinking about over the last year or so and discussing with clients.
I think that's a great idea, David, and I can start us off and give some background on the main colors of hydrogen. And just for those who may not be familiar, these colors are not literal. Hydrogen itself is actually colorless and odorless, but instead, these colors are really used as a shorthand to describe how the hydrogen was produced and the consequential carbon footprint. So to start off, brown hydrogen is produced from coal with water and heat, and hydrogen can then be extracted from the resulting syngas. There is a really interesting brown coal gasification and hydrogen pilot project in process right now in the Latrobe Valley in Australia called the Hystra Demonstration Project. This project is going to involve liquefaction and storage of liquefied hydrogen, or LH2, at the Port of Hastings. And then, and this is the part that I'm really excited about, David, and I'm sure you are too, given our LNG background, the LH2 is going to be transported from Australia to Japan in the world's first ocean-going LH2 carrier. So that's a project that we'll definitely be watching.
That's really exciting. And especially, I think you referenced LNG as we think about the parallels between the development of the value chains for LNG and hydrogen. And I suppose in that vein, there's a number of synergies between hydrogen and natural gas. The next two colors of hydrogen, as you were beginning to discuss, that are commonly used are gray and blue. Both refer to hydrogen produced using natural gas via steam reformation. The The difference between gray and blue is that blue hydrogen includes the capture of the carbon that results from the production of the hydrogen from methane. Gray hydrogen does not utilize carbon capture and storage technology. As a result, and I think from my perspective, with an increasing focus on climate change in the global investment community, I think it's very likely that gray hydrogen increasingly will be disfavored. Regardless, the potential for a global commercial scale hydrogen economy presents major opportunities for natural gas, and I expect that gas will be a critical part of hydrogen's rise, shall we say? Pun intended, as green hydrogen technologies become more cost competitive.
Yeah, it is. It is truly amazing, David, to think about where we could be headed with hydrogen. You mentioned green hydrogen, which is the last main color of hydrogen, and green hydrogen is produced using renewable energy, so wind, solar, hydropower, and that renewable energy is used to power electrolysis, which is a process that splits water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. And then from there, the hydrogen can be stored or transported to an end user. As we talk about in the Hydrogen Handbook, pairing hydrogen production with renewable energy production provides the potential to optimize renewable energy resources, which currently face pretty significant intermittency challenges. Given carbon emissions reductions goals, as David mentioned, we think current government incentives are most likely to continue to focus on green hydrogen, although certainly in the near future, blue hydrogen will continue to remain in focus.
That's right. I agree with that, Sandy. And I'll add that we've seen government interest in helping to explore questions and potential solutions around transporting hydrogen by pipeline. So this is a subject, obviously, that I know you and I could talk about at length. And may I suggest that maybe we do a separate podcast later on transportation of hydrogen by pipeline. But it's a good segue now into some of the questions that our team has been discussing as we think about the development of the hydrogen economy. One, which you touched on briefly, is the role of existing infrastructure. As our listeners probably will know, here in the U.S., we have tens of thousands of miles of natural gas pipelines, both large interstates and small diameter intrastate distribution lines. If we could use that infrastructure to transport hydrogen either on a dedicated basis or perhaps blended into the natural gas stream, could be a huge boost for the hydrogen industry. But of course, there are challenges that will have to be overcome to achieve that, both I think from an engineering and safety perspective and kind of the fundamental regulatory structure for achieving that. Another set of questions I think arises around how we'll actually buy and sell the commodity. In some industries, we've seen standard form contracts used. So, for example, the NASB agreement in the natural gas industry, which you and I are familiar with. And there can be real benefits in terms of efficiency to that approach, which the hydrogen industry may want to consider. But a significant aspect of that, of course, will be what currency is going to be used as the benchmark for hydrogen sales. So it seems to me that's a much bigger question and probably is going to take some time to resolve, perhaps just through natural market evolution.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, David. And I hope that the question of the currency that will be attached to hydrogen in a global economy won't act as a hindrance for the development of the economy itself, although it does provide a really interesting look into how support for hydrogen is developing across the globe. As we discuss in the Hydrogen Handbook, Australia, as well as a number of other countries in Asia and Europe, already have put national level financial support behind hydrogen. I mentioned France, Germany, and Spain earlier, and there are others as well. In addition, many people think that the UK might join that group as it prepares to host COP26, which is the 26th UN Climate Change Conference. Those countries may emerge as top contenders for the global benchmark currency for hydrogen. I think you're right. We'll have to see how it evolves, and that it may be a function of market forces. But I know there are a number of other questions that we've been thinking about and are excited to discuss with our colleagues and guests on this podcast, but we'll leave it there for today. And I'll turn it back to you, actually, David.
Great, thanks. So we really appreciate everyone tuning in to our first podcast. I will just put in a plug here. We hope that you will go to klgates.com/hydrogen and check out our resources there, including the Hydrogen Handbook. It's a free resource that is available for downloading. A really robust publication coming in at a whopping almost 300 pages, Sandy, covering Australia, the European Union, Germany, Japan, the UK, and the United States. But in all seriousness, it represents a collaborative effort across more than 50 of our professionals at K&L Gates across the globe, and really reflects the deep industry knowledge and a breadth of the skills that our team has that'll be critical for the commercial scale deployment of hydrogen. In addition, we've got a great lineup of podcasts coming on Hydrogen Rising here. I'll be hosting our next podcast, which I'm excited about, which will feature our colleagues from London and Brussels, talking about the EU and UK hydrogen strategies and incentives. So please tune in to that. And on behalf of both of us, we're excited to start this dialogue with all of you listeners out there. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us if you have questions or suggestions for topics for future podcasts. So long.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hydrogen Rising. Be sure to subscribe to receive timely notifications of future episodes, and check out our market-leading publication, The Hydrogen Handbook, on our website at www.klgates.com.